All right, let's start.
If I sit there, you can see me.
Sort of.
I don't mind standing.
Okay. All right.
I'm talking. Talk forever. So you guys will have to give me like a 10-minute warning.
Okay.
Okay, so you don't have to wait till the end to ask questions. I don't expect to try and things so not one of these people that has to hear myself talk, not get instructed. I think it's always better when you have to give them tickets. What I'm here today to talk to you guys about, I'm Maria Hopkins, if you don't already know. I've been an appraiser going on 31 years this year. I'm a realtor. I was a realtor before I was an appraiser. Some houses for about a year. I went to college. And they're found appraising. Decided I like that better. But I only sell now my own stuff or I'm never in competition. I get tons of referrals from realtors. You're also probably going to find out that you get a lot of phone calls from my office. To sell the property because we call and verify the sales. The important thing about the appraiser is most number one important. Actually, all the brokers who sell the homes find out the circumstances of the sale to make sure it's a lot of people think an arm's length transaction is everything that isn't sold between levels. A lot of lenders think that non-arm's length transaction is sold between levels. That's not true. An arm's length transaction has to be the test fair market value, which is nobody's going to a buyer, your proof of seller, nobody acting under duress, all that stuff without terms that might influence the price paid. All that stuff goes into an arm's length transaction. So what I've been doing lately, because a lot of the deals, the number of reasons why appraisals are coming low right now, and some of the worst quality appraisals are out there right now. I usually do a lot of other appraisals work, so I know. One of the reasons is because you have appraisal management companies now. That's the now, the reason that came into being was a good reason. I mean, because of all the fraud going on, where the appraisals being handpicked by the lenders, hit numbers, break stuff out. It should have been the case. And to ignore repairs. They put a system in place whereby the person that has an interest in but in a mortgage company, they cannot pick the appraisal. So what a lot of them did, and it's not what they have to do, but what most of them did is go to appraisal management companies who came into being because they saw the opportunity to go in and be the middleman. And when the appraisal industry kind of went a little soft, it would be easier for appraisals who needed work or appraisals got laid off from other companies to take those assignments at cut rates. So what you have is a lot of appraisal management companies out there that are still putting appraisals out to bid, and the cheapest steps appraisal to take. Now, the appraiser is supposed to say their location confident, but I know a lot of you know, and if they're coming a long way, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not location confident. I mean, I do North Shore, South Shore, you know, there's a lot of people coming in that don't have a lot of experience, that really don't know the town. They might not have ever been in town, and they're not supposed to be doing those appraisals. Wait till they kill the deal and try and complain, you're probably not going to get it. So if you have any concern, you might want to pick up the phone and say, the guy didn't even know how to get it to hold. The guy had to ask me what exit to get off.
So it's a legitimate question to ask what company they're with and where they're coming from.
Oh, you definitely should be finding out where the appraisal is coming from. This is going to a mortgage company. The local lender, or credit union, or bank, they're still handpicking their good, qualified local people. Sometimes they're in-house loans, but even if they're not, they're only going to have a staff of appraisals that are approved, that they know or they think anyway are qualified. They're going to have quality controls in place, and they're going to have somebody that is not in the loan department necessarily who's ordering the appraisals and rotating those appraisals. So, and they don't necessarily make commission. So it's not, if somebody gets their loan or doesn't get their loan, that doesn't mean they're going to make more money. So, it's a whole different system with banks and credit unions. So, that doesn't mean you don't want to use mortgage companies, because there's times when it's better to use a mortgage company. I'll get into that a little bit. One of the things realtors have to learn right now is not represent buyers and sellers and give them guidance on what to do if you don't understand financing yourself and you don't know what the things are that can kill your deal in the middle of it. Only because of lack of knowledge most of the time. probably something you could have avoided or done something about, or maybe steered the loan to go to the right kind of lender so it wouldn't have done. And I tell the DRs all the time, you know, they need to make the people that work for them learn this stuff, because you lose money, you know, the company. Every deal that you lose, they lose. When we give a seminar at the Board of Realtors, you know, we get 40 people, whatever it is, we should be getting hundreds. Everybody needs to learn about financing, because nobody out there teaches you. You're not going to learn it in any training you have. And lenders, a lot, especially lenders, they have a vested interest. They don't want you to know. They would rather you just say, I'm the one taking care of financing. That's not your thing. Your thing is to sell the house. Let me take care of the finance. And loan originators that are taking in the loans, a lot of them are very knowledgeable, very good, but sometimes they do not anticipate. They also have control over what's going on behind the but then it goes to other people and other things happen that are not necessarily in their control. And there are, like in every profession, there are better mortgage companies and not as good. And I work for like 35 different lenders. I work for mortgage companies, I work for friends, I work for banks and credit unions. And most appraisers are not going to stand up here because of what I thought of them, letting you guys know this. Because I'm in it every day, and I know what happens. I know all the things that can go wrong, and I just think only good can come out of having knowledge and education. It really helps them along. And a lot of these things, if they're brought up and dealt with up front, you know, might not kill a deal, but if a buyer finds out about a problem at that stage, at the appraisal stage, that's when they start to get cold feet, start to second guess whether they should buy a house, start to not trust everybody involved, because why did they know this before? So, you know, sometimes if you just handle things head on, it's just way better. I can't even tell you how many appraisals I'll go to in broker and say, well, I knew there was feeling pain, but I was just waiting to see the appraisal. It's falling off the house. What do you think of the appraisal? We have to take pictures, all four sides of the house. 1 out of every 10 appraisals for VA, they come out in the house. So that appraisal lets you know. With FHA, what happens is once a year they gather up 50, 100 appraisals at a time after they've closed or and they send them to one appraiser that's contracted to review those on quality control, which means they drive to the house. They actually get paid more to get in. So I have a contract, I go in the house on the weekend, I knock on the door, and if something is falling in, oh, was that like that when you bought the house? Yep. Okay, FHA loan, that, you know. So it's really not worth it for appraisals with government loans to be in projects. If they are, sometimes it's just out of stupidity, you know, you have to take pictures of every room now. You have to take pictures all the way around the house. The newest thing with FHA now is the comp picture of the comp has to be taken from there. You no longer head on the picture. So once in a while, you can't see the house in the street when you take a picture, or in an emergency when you don't have the picture, and you go in MLS to take the comp picture. It's really nice if you guys have an angled front picture, you know, from one way or the other, because then at least that meets the regulation. It's only FHA so far, but who knows? And I don't even really know the reason behind it. I think they can just see something a little bit more about the house when they're reviewing it. I don't know. So there's some new FHA guidelines that are affecting a lot of loans. But even the old FHA guidelines, things that you guys could learn and know. And like I said, it's not being taught anywhere, so that's why I'm here. I'm trying to get the word out. Why do I want to take my time to do this? Well, I'm a teeny bit slower right now. Usually I'm really pretty out straight. I still am. But I just truly believe after all these years that the best way to work is as a team. Appraisers and realtors can work professionally as a team. And most people with cell phones and stuff like that now find a way to be able to get back to appraisers who are trying to do their job and call and ask a few questions. And I know you're going to get some new people that call and probably ask stupid questions like the stuff that's already in MLS, so just be patient. Help them out, because you never know. I mean, we know the people that are always calling us back and helping us out. And I always tell people, you know, it works both ways. Here's my cell. If you need to pick my brain about something, call me. I talk to realtors all the time. I have an in-law apartment. I have no idea what they have for, so, I do tell people call me weekends, nights, and early mornings, because between 9 and 5 is insane. You know how it is when you have deadlines and phones are ringing and you have all these things to get out. So mortgage companies are the only ones that do FHA and VA. Now, a lot of the lenders now. We have more VA loans than we've ever had in history. In all of the years I've been appraising, I've never seen so many VA loans. I'm one of the major VA appraisers in this area, and even in the last 2 years, we ended up taking on more VA work. So, there's only a handful of us, and they rotate us, and you're going to get us quite often on VA. FHAs are still, a way for lenders with for buyers with lower credit scores and issues to go get qualified to buy a house, but then you have to worry about the house. Some of the mortgage companies have the 203K streamlined loans in place. There's recent changes to those that are making it more difficult for them to do those, and they're starting to wonder if they want to get involved in them. So I'm just learning this is a real recent development now, because they have to not only worry about the license that the general contractor that is handling the repairs on the job, but now any sub has to have licenses. Any sub has to be that mortgage company. It makes it a lot more cumbersome. But one of the really good mortgage companies that does some work, so I don't know if we're going to do them anymore because it's getting more difficult. Like that. Yeah, but what if there's only a couple things? What if they only need a boiler and some plumbing work? You're only dealing with a plumber. You're going to give away that loan because you have to deal with. I understand if you have 10 different contracts, but so far they're continuing to do them. But just be aware that if you thought it was a no-brainer that your buyer could get a 203K streamline, which means they can do the loan and close and do the repairs after, as long as the repairs come up to under $30,000. So if you have a septic, that can eat up most or all of it. But that is a really good way. So it irritates me when I see listings that say this cannot go FHA. That's not true necessarily, because there's an FHA program that would allow an FHA buyer to go in and buy that house and close and do repairs afterwards. There are a couple of lenders in this area that do a lot. I do a lot of the appraisals for us. What happened when the FHA guidelines changed months ago was 2/3 of the appraisers that did FHA dropped off the list and said, I no longer will do FHA. The fees went up a little bit. Actually, they went up a good chunk amount, but then some of the appraisers didn't charge more, so now they're kind of coming back down and balancing out. As with everything, we're going to do a lot more work with that. So what are the FHA repairs that have to be done? The lenders now are coming up with a list to tell the appraisers you have to affirmatively address these issues on the appraisal. So I'm going to read some of them to you so that you will know, because everybody's always saying, how the hell do I know what they are? And if you go online and find the FHA guidelines and the VA guidelines, they're just set. So if you know the basic ones, you can at least, keep that written down, and you can at least be looking for that in your listing, so you know you got to deal with this one way or the other. But don't put in a listing that it can't go FHA, because it may be able to do that. And, right away I was talking to a buyer agent the other day that said, they didn't tell me that this wouldn't go FHA, so I bring my buyer, and it had peeling paint and a wall missing, so my buyer couldn't buy that. I'm like, that's really a shame, because your buyer really could have bought that. So this is what I mean. You got realtors representing the sellers that are losing out on buyers. You got realtors representing the buyers that are losing out on properties they could have easily bought, and that's a shame.
And that moves into the streamline loan, right?
Yeah. If you go there and it may qualify on its own or streamline. I am doing one sale myself for my best friend's son, and we went into this house. It's a short sale, but it needs one wall is all insulated and needs to be sheetrock, and the whole outside of the house is peeling. So our offer said, we don't want to do a 203K. We're going to get all approved, and a week before closing, we are going to go paint. It's a ranch. We're going to go paint the house and put up the wall and close. And that offer is getting accepted. Now, whether the lender on the short sale goes along with it, we're gonna see, but that's what we're gonna try and do. I'd rather do that than pay the extra fees, the time and aggravation on 203K streamline. We could, but, you know, it's not that hard a week before closing. I mean, we just had one in FHA that you had in Caxton, and the garage needed to be painted, and God bless you, went to yourself. Next time I have you gotta have a list of, then you're not busy enough. You gotta have a list of those people that you send out to do stuff and you pay them. Cleaning out stuff and painting things and putting up smoke, all that stuff. Yeah, you need an assistant. When you're busy enough, you'll end up with an assistant and you'll end up with contractors. So let me read you the list of what we have to deal with here. If the house is on a crawl space, and this could be a partial crawl space, access to that crawl space has to be at least 18 inches tall, and the appraiser has to take a picture of it. That can cause a problem if it's not big enough. It may not qualify for it.
Now, is that the same with the ceiling? So if you have the crawl space to get into a ceiling like an attic, like say small cape. Like
no, this is a crawl under the house.
Okay.
Not the attic. Now the FHA requires us. We always, for an FHA, had to go up in the attic and do head and shoulders inspection to take a picture. That's basically we did one thing. Now, if it's a pull down or a walk up, we have to go up and we have to inspect and take pictures all along the roof. We have to check ventilation, the roof, look for mold. We are responsible for all of that. If it's a scuttle, we are still allowed to just do the head and shoulders picture.
When you say it has to be 18 inches tall, what do you mean it has to be like a door for you to go in?
No, not a door, just the opening has to be 18 inches.
Oh, okay.
What do you? The houses, especially out by the ocean, they're up on cement columns.
Oh,
so
yeah.
They're not. What if the house itself isn't 18 inches above the ground? Just has.
I don't know that that will be a problem because you have a lot of access, even if it's not 18 inches, and that's not really a crawl because it's not got the foundation all the way around it. You know, that's open. So I think the problem is with the crawl, I think the reasoning is they want to have access. So you may actually have to make the hole bigger. I mean, it might be better to do that than give up on the hole, give up on the start all over.
So,
but you know, these guidelines are written for the appraisers, and a lot of them, some were good in doing guidelines, some weren't. So now we have lenders actually making us a list of the must-dos for the appraisers to aggressively address in every report. So, you know, we can't get away with it. 18 inches.
why?
It says tall. That's the wording, tall. But I think,
Probably 18
you know,
by 18.
It's got to be at least 18 inches.
yeah, it's got to be.
Fire code for windows has to be 20 by 24. Out if there's a fire. This is for that purpose. So I guess if you're a skinny person, I think it's skinny.
Now, if you have an access to an attic, like I went to one the other day, and it was a tape, and it was in a closet, it was a side eave, it's the only eave access, but they had it nailed shut, that's a problem. We have to come back. So please make sure the appraiser has access. Whatever the attic access is, the appraiser has to go there. All right, so then we used to just say, oh, the utilities were on and functioning on the day of inspection. Now we have to state which utilities were on and which ones were not. So you need to tell the appraiser, the electric's on, the plumbing is not. You have to tell them whether it can or cannot be turned back on. There's houses that have been winterized that have plumbing stolen or plumbing leaks that you can't turn it back on, and the appraiser needs to know that ahead of time so they can call the lender and figure out how they're going to deal with it.
So on foreclosures or whatever else, if they're winterized right now, we have to pay to have it de-winterized.
It depends on which loan, which type of financing you're going for, but usually with VA, believe it or not, they do not make you de-winterize. However, if we have a known problem with it, they still won't make you like the boiler's cracked for sure, and there's plumbing copper missing. We don't necessarily have to de-winterize it. We already know those things, so we'll be subject to fixing those things.
So
now,
for the VA, how do they pass the water
VA,
test?
a lender will tell you some of them, oh, VA doesn't allow holdbacks. That's not true. VA does allow holdbacks. Some mortgage companies will do them, and some will not. So it's a good idea if there's a question, or even if you're steering people to VA loans somewhere, find out which ones will do holdbacks in case you end up with one someday.
The same for like a water test. If it's winterized, you can't do a water test for a VA loan. So can
Right.
would it be a holdback situation for that, or would you need to turn it on to have the water test done?
If you can turn it on, you have to do it, otherwise it may end up being a holdback. Okay, the lender has to deal with that. So there are some. I had a poor old guy that, the national lenders are the ones that people go to online, and I won't name names, but there's a lot of VAs, actually they have VA in the name and everything, lenders online that people go and apply to, or that realtors even get referrals from, and that gets tough. You get a referral from a veteran lender that's national, and that's how you got the buyer. It's kind of tough. You can't go steering that buyer to a different VA lender. But if they don't do holdbacks, and you've got a situation like that with a buyer that you're taking to a house, that's kind of a problem, especially where a local person that does VA loans.
Now, if a house does fail a water test, can they do a holdback for the water test, or does that need to be corrected before they close?
I would think that they can do a holdback. I mean, there are lenders that will do that. So, how they figure out how much to hold back, I don't know. So there's, and I won't publicly name names of mortgage companies that are good and ones that aren't, but I can definitely, if somebody asks me point blank, do you know of some that don't do holdback, that you work for, that's a factual statement. I could tell people who those people are. And, there are a lot of the local good ones that you probably are dealing with anyway. Just be aware, though, if you get somebody coming to you and they're already dealing with one of the national online lenders, that kind of need to know this stuff. You want to deal with it head on. Like I said, you want to deal with it ahead of time. It's not an impossible situation sometimes if you already know, but it's when you find out late in the deal, like at the appraisal stage, is not the time you find stuff out. We always had to comment on the location and condition of the septic tank and field, including the proximity to the well. Now, I have appraisers call me and say, what the hell do we do about that? And because I will not state how far a well is from septic system. I'm not qualified to do that. So what we always do is refer people to the Title V test, because that's going to tell you how close they are and if you pass the Title V. And that's the person that's qualified to do it. So I'll say to the person that wants me to address it, if you go get me that report that says it, I'll include that, and then I'll just repeat what that says. But I do not even address it in my report, and I never even get asked about it. There are a couple lenders out there that will ask appraisers to address it, and they think that they got to go figure that out. And I'll tell the appraisers that call me, you are not responsible for that. I know it's on the list of FHA things. They may want you to address it in the report, but you go make somebody else get you the qualified report that tells you how far apart they are. In Mass, the problem is these are national rules. In Mass, we have Title V, so we have a way of, finding out. And there are designs on record at boards of health and stuff like that. Okay. So then we have to say whether or not the kitchen cabinets, well, not kitchen, all cabinets and drawers operate effectively. So in the old days, if there was a cabinet door missing or drawers missing or not working, I wouldn't make a big deal out of it. But now we're kind of forced to make an issue out of it.
Is that just FHA and VA?
That's just FHA.
FHA.
So if one doesn't fully close, is that considered working properly? Sometimes they just need that little magnet.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm not going to call for something like that, but you never know if you can get somebody that, is newer in business and being a stickler about it. I mean, we have to be fair.
Yeah.
But we do have to take pictures of the kitchen and take pictures of the bath, so,
Door missing.
So be aware if there's, I don't know, if there's a missing door, make it look like it's supposed to be that
I
way.
was going to say, fill in the little holes where the hinge is supposed to be. I mean, like, it's an exposed shelf.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
Make
cabinets off
it
of
look
one
like
of
it's
mine,
supposed to
because
be like that, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but
that's weird.
just be aware that that could have been a no problem thing, and now it's a problem. Although, when you think about it, it might be a cheap fix just to get through the inspection, so. I mean, it's not even expensive to change out a bath vanity. The other thing is, there's no rule saying sellers have to do the work. This is a negotiable item, so keep that in mind. But I will tell you, a lot of people will say, well, if that buyer wasn't going FHA, then we wouldn't have this problem, so the buyer should be responsible for that. Or deal with it in the price. There's a million ways you can deal with it. But there are some things that are even a problem with conventional, and I'm always amazed that they aren't addressed. Railings are a problem for every house, every loan. Outside railings are a problem. 3 steps have to have a railing. So, you know, and you can also measure, there's a height requirement. Some people, if it's like 2.5, 3 steps, builders will build up the mulch. So that the distance is okay and they still get their sign off.
Does it have to be on both sides of the stair?
Yeah, that's a question, and that's the other thing. The best thing you can do is call the building inspector and just ask a general question. Because I'm not saying you gotta go pull a building permit. Some appraisers might make you. I really try not to do that, but I'll say, call the building inspector and ask if you need one or both. At a certain height, you're gonna need both sides, so. You know, I tell people, at least find out what the code is and have it put on the code, even if you're not gonna pull a permit and all that. The appraiser coming back has to say it was done in a workmanlike manner, which is what they say it's code. So, the basement stair railing is a problem for FHA and VA, but not conventional unless the appraiser wants to make it an issue. I don't know anybody who does. So you gotta have a basement railing, and the railings have to now turn in. So even if you have a railing, if you can catch your sleeve on it, if it's just sticking up there, you gotta get a block of wood and just nail it on there so it connects that piece to the wall. Because there's a new code, and all the new construction, even on deck railings and everything, have to abide by it, where you have to have the turn in, because there were people catching the sleeve, mothers in bathrobes, babies in hand, and going down those stairs. And believe me, I swear these building inspectors must have been shown videos or something, because I have never seen a new rule that is so adamantly enforced as I have seen that with new construction. They are all adamant, just like when you've had any kind of situation in a town where you had a kid drown or almost drown, you will find building inspectors unbelievably diligent about making sure fences around pools.
Now, those restaurant pools are grandfathered in, right? So if it was pre-2001, the pool, they don't, I don't think they have to, right? Or
No, that's
owns
not
it,
true. You should check with the town, but safety issues are never grandfathered in the first place. So you'll have people like with second egresses on multifamily say, oh, it's grandfathered. I got this stairway going up to a window and it's fine. And the building inspector told me it's fine. I'm like, yeah, you go ask them, put it in writing. We never will, because that's not true.
Even if they will, they might not.
An appraiser will never let a second egress go. I don't care what building inspector says anything, because if they are stupid enough to ever put it in writing, and I've never seen one in the whole state of Massachusetts ever in 30 years who want to put it in writing, they know they cannot override the state safety code for an egress. They can't. So you have to have a door and landing and stairs with the right railing and all that. So egresses, I will make people pull a building permit, because the building inspector has to even decide where it's going to go from. So you don't say, oh, this would be a good place where this window is in this room, and go hire a contractor, even a licensed one, who goes and puts it in. You can't do that. You have to pull a building permit for a. I had a realtor own one the other day, and it had the metal ladder coming out the window in the town, and she thought it was fine because the building inspector thought it was grandfathered. I said, go back and talk to him. Ask him to put it in writing, even if he says yes, which he ended up saying no. You got to put it in.
Back to the hand railing, it has to be returned at the top and the bottom to the wall.
Yeah, the new construction has to be returned, but on existing ones, I'm really more picky about it's the top.
Yeah.
You know, because that's where they're gonna.
Falling down is worse than
And
falling
it's
up.
so easy, if you have an existing one, just take the block of wood. But I don't know how many times I go there, and now it's $100 for me to pay and do the inspection when they put this railing on or paint this little thing of paint. For $100, they could have paid for it to be done. So what a shame, you know? So
I just can't, I've never heard of that.
whether the buyer or the seller does the railing, and like I said, for outside the house, it's for every loan.
Right.
Problem for every loan. Don't forget, even if the appraiser misses it, takes pictures, doesn't say anything to you, because I've missed them before. Just, I don't know, talking, got a picture with Snowbank, wasn't paying attention, then the underwriter sees it, and they're gonna call for it. It would have to be a miracle to get by, really.
I'm assuming that rule goes to the second floor stairs going up and down as well.
Yeah, the railing's supposed to go from first to second floor, yeah. Yeah, on VA and FHA
No, I'm
especially.
talking about the return then.
Oh, the return, yes. At the top of the stairs. But like I said, for a conventional loan, I may not make a big deal. Although if I went up and, I have gone up and there's those spindles at the top of the stairs that are along the hallway, and I've gone up where they're missing or something, those would have to be done for a conventional. I mean, there are things you're not gonna get away with. Now, they used to say that if you had subflooring and no carpeting, that had to be put in for VA loans. They've now changed their mind. What happened was New Hampshire, up in Manchester, New Hampshire, was our headquarters for Massachusetts, for VA. So whatever they said was rules. That's gone now, and it's merged with the office in Cleveland. Cleveland is where the regional VA office is. So all the answers and all the interpretations and everything have to come out of Cleveland. So what Cleveland is saying is as long as the appraiser can say there's no trip hazard for the subflooring, then it's okay if the carpeting doesn't go in. So if you had, it came up on one because they had a big family room. It was all finished, but the carpet had been ripped out and was just subflooring there. And I guess the lender called the VA to see if that carpeting had to be put in. It was told no. That's how I learned about it. I called Cleveland to double check, and they were right. They were right. Now they're not required to put in. But you have to say there's no trip hazard. So the thing that might come up is you've got ripped vinyl sticking up and stuff, and now you have pieces of subflooring missing. That could be an issue. Better off just taking the whole thing off. So that's a change. I mean, I would have never guessed that was true, but I, never say never. So now the newest thing about the appliances, I don't know if you guys have heard, but if the appliances are included in the deal for an FHA, we have to inspect them, just like a home inspector does, to the point where we have to run the dishwasher a full cycle.
Really?
We do have to turn the heat on in the boiler and make sure all the baseboards are getting warm. So if it's summer and we're coming out to do an inspection, I got to tell my realtor, can you get there and turn that steam boiler on? Because I got to make sure it's working and we can sit up there forever. So, the heating thing to me is more important than the appliance. So what I'm recommending is just on a general basis, it's not a bad idea to be doing appliances outside. You guys do enough side agreements for everything else. Why not do appliances? Just pretend you're selling them to this buyer out of Craigslist and put them as a side agreement. Because you don't know sometimes when a lot of these buyers could get to the lender and decide to go USDA or FHA. And USDA is the same guidelines as FHA. Requires an FHA appraiser and has the same background. So you don't know if it could change midstream, if somebody gets approved conventional, but then goes to the lender who says to them, the rate's a little better, and you borrow 100% of the money and then save your down payment to do some work afterwards, and the next thing you know, they're approved to do conventional if they need to, but they're going to try the USDA or FHA route first. The USDA program is the one 100% home buyers are doing. It is really good. And, so I had a friend, and I said, put in the conventional offer and then put right on it, with the conventional put right on it that you may elect to do the 100% USDA loan, but you can do conventional if that doesn't work, so that there would be more likely, because, the fear is, it's more risky to do FHA with no money down buyer than it is, to do conventional. Maybe not. So again, I think the fear in it is where realtors might say to their sellers, or you might have a lender owned or a short sale. The fear is out of lack of knowledge. The fear is, well, something could go wrong with that one, so I'd rather get a buyer that can do the conventional. But then you'll have something go wrong with the one that you thought was the safer one. So if you have a good local lender doing that USDA or FHA, it can work just fine. I have had some really complicated ones go through some lenders where they had a list of things that were wrong with the contract. And then I go and inspect, and they left out some really obvious repairs, and I had to have them add those in, and then they had to have the contractor go add those to the list. And in one case, he was really close to 30 grand, but I felt he was getting an awful lot of money to do some of those repairs, and I pretty much out said, have the guy include these the same money, because he's charging really good. It's not like he's on a real thin margin with what he's charging you to do already, and just tell him it's either that or not. He's not going to get the whole thing. A lot of times they will. They'll go and include a couple more things for the same price, especially if they're cosmetic things. So the best thing you can do is have those appliances, on a side agreement. Really helps. So I don't know, and then if there's an in-law, some of the appraisers didn't know that if we have an in-law apartment, we're not allowed to just put that all in the living area and compare it to other houses that have that living area, and then maybe do a little adjustment for the fact this one has the in-law setup. Because I used to do that sometimes, depending on where it was located. We have to put it on a separate line. So the appraiser has to do the main house, compare that to other main houses with that square footage, and then they have to have a separate line for the in-law apartment with the GLA that the in-law apartment has. And that's normally how the best way to appraise it anyway. The times where I've not done that is if somebody stuck a kitchenette and made an in-law like on the second floor, and most people wouldn't use it that way.
I just comped one and I had a hell of a time comping it, but that's how I did it. And I was concerned that I wasn't right, and I advised them to hire an appraiser.
Yeah.
Because it was just so hard to comp. It's a little ranch with a full in-law apartment.
Yeah.
So it was really.
That should be done separately.
That's how I did it.
And if you can find comps with other in-laws, they do try and get the appraiser to get another comp with an in-law, even if it's an extra one out of town or older or something in addition to the ones they're already using and all that, so it gets harder. And it is kind of hard to comp an in-law that's in a basement compared to an in-law that's attached, compared to an in-law that's over a garage that,
Yeah,
the only time I've really put them together, and then I put we have a functional utility line, and I put in-law setup, and I give it an extra maybe $5,000 for the kitchen and everything being there and have it be set up that way, and then include it all together, is if it's like the second floor or part of the second floor. It's part of the living area that normally is really the main house, and the people buying it may not even use it the way it's set up. And then but now with the rules the way they are now, I wouldn't even have the option. So with in-laws, I know what most realtors do is figure whatever the assessors has is probably what it is, and they go by that to market it. Or they figure, well, I don't know if it's legally a two-family or an in-law, or my people are saying it's an in-law, so I'll just market it as an in-law and say possible two-family. That gets me off the hook from liability. That's the worst thing you can do. That does not get you off the hook, because the problem is now you get a buyer, and the buyer goes to the bank and they apply for a certain kind of loan. Multi-family loans are different than single-family loans. It's a different program, maybe a different down payment requirement, a different way of qualifying. And then the appraiser comes and they have to figure out what it really is, and you never want to hope that an appraiser gets it wrong and it closes, because now you are definitely liable. Because they're the biggest lawsuits you can have and lose, and the same thing with an appraiser. My appraisers are not allowed to write anything that's a multifamily or has an in-law without me going over legality and okaying it before they start writing it. Because my biggest liability for a lawsuit is them getting that wrong and it going out and it closing. And then at the same time that I screw it up and get it wrong, that realtor is now right on the hook with me. Because believe me, if there's a lawsuit, they will say, you are a licensed real estate professional and you should have gone and figured out which it was, not just the appraiser. So if the appraiser gets it wrong, I've had people get irritated with me because I found out something was legally a little different than I thought. I said, you should be thanking me right now. Because if this ever closed, I can't even tell you how many lawsuits I've been involved in. When the market tanked, a lot of times the value that people lost was because the market went down. But then they find out one of the units wasn't legal, and believe me, they blame it on that.
So if it's not zoned to be a multifamily,
You have to figure out how did it get there.
but they have an in-law apartment, they have an in-law that they had their mother live in, but it's got a full kitchen, bathroom,
They may have
bedroom,
had
living
an
room.
in-law live there, and it might still be legally an apartment. It might be
That's what I'm
grandfathered
saying.
in.
So how do you know if it's an apartment or if it's an
The
in-law?
first thing you have to do is
If the
do
town
not
has
look at the assessor's record is the first clue. That tells us what they think is there. So if they have it as a two-family, that doesn't mean it legally is. That means they know about the two units because they have to assess it for whatever is
Right,
there.
they're taxing based on it, but they don't.
If they assess it as a single family, that also does not mean that the in-law apartment or a second unit isn't legal. It just means the assessors don't know it's there. So they have to assess whatever it is. If they go there and it's split up into 4 units, they have to assess it that way. The assessors by law have to assess whatever's there. If somebody opens a store on the first floor of that apartment, they have to assess it as a mixed-use commercial.
So
residential
for an
properties.
in-laws, is simple as just removing a door and saying that there's no doorway to separate the two units, that it's not an
Well,
in-law, or
if
is
you
it?
want it to be an in-law, then you may have to work with the building department, because the other thing is, if it's grandfathered in as a second legal unit, rentable unit, and you turn it into an in-law, then you can't go back.
If it's an in-law currently, that's my
If
question.
it's really an in-law currently, then it is. I mean, an in-law can have two egresses or one. A two-family can have, legally be a two-family, but this is the worst situation, when it's legally a two-family, but it doesn't have a second egress, because now it's in-law. Because the in-law doesn't have to have the second egress. I mean, with some towns, if you put an in-law on a new construction, they'll make sure there's two egresses, but you know, there's a million in-laws that don't.
A lot of
So
times
the second
in-laws
one
are
is into the
illegal, right?
house.
A lot of times in-laws are illegal, right? They don't approve them anymore.
They're not illegal. Zoning bylaws in almost every town do not recognize the word in-law. The word in-law is a real estate market term for an apartment that's there that legally cannot be rented or used by family. It's a market term that we all came up with. Now, the town of Paxton actually has in-law, the word in-law in their zoning, where you actually have to go get a special permit and pay $10 for the use of the in-law apartment, and they have it right in zoning. That is extremely unusual. Most towns do not recognize the word in-law. It's just a market term that we've all come up with to describe an area that's not a legally rentable apartment.
So if that's,
Boston just did the same thing a few years ago. They finally put it in because they didn't have in-law anywhere in their bylaws at all.
Now, a lot of zoning has accessory units. Accessory units can be rented or not rented depending on the zoning bylaws. Usually, if they have them in there that they can be rented, they may also have a rule that it has to be owner occupied. I just did an appraisal in Saugus of a legal two-family house. And it turns out in 1985, they got a special permit, which is how the zoning is. You can have two families with a special permit. But in this case, they gave the special permit, but they put right in there that the special permit was granted, but it always had to be owner occupied. So I had to appraise it as a two-family, and I had to decide that the fact that it has to remain owner occupied have an effect on value, and I had to address that. I did not feel it did, because most investors aren't going to buy a two-family. They're usually bought by people who want to live in one of the units anyway, so I didn't think it had anything to do with it, but it was really important that I put that in there. And the buyer, if it was being sold, would have to be represented that to them. You always must owner occupy this two-family if you want to rent out a unit. So if you want to move on to a single family and rent both of these out later, you can't do that. So you need to know that up front. That may not be the one you want to buy.
No, when you say that you can decide if there's going to affect value of a house, is there a tool that you guys are using that tells you how much value this is? For instance, if that was, is there a tool that says, hey, that's 10,000 more or less, or if there's a view on a house, it's 10,000 more or less? I mean, is it just your judgment call? You're going up there and saying?
It's the appraiser's judgment. But they also, well, a view thing is going to be subjective. Quality condition is going to be subjective a little bit. It's the appraiser's judgment, but it's also based on, I'll say experience, and if you were on the stand, that's a tough thing to only say, well, I think it's based on my experience, because I do a lot of that. The methodology that an appraiser theoretically is using is called matched pair analysis. Now, that is where we are trained to collect a lot of data, and a lot of it we do with new construction. So if you're an office that does a lot of new construction appraising, then it helps you collect a lot of this data. But you got to update it over the years. One of the problems that people are having is appraisers were doing certain square footage adjustments and stuff from 20 years ago, and they never changed. They just were always doing the same thing they were doing 20 years ago. So appraisers have been having courses where they say, be careful, you guys can't do $25 a square foot living area adjustments on your house that you were doing 30 years ago. You know, maybe it's 50 now, maybe it's 70 now. You got to really start paying attention to the methodology of how you extract that. So theoretically, if you have a new construction house and you have the same house with a two-car garage and a house without the two-car garage, and the house with the two-car garage sells for $20,000 more, you have enough of those, that's your value of a two-car garage. And it is about $10,000 per day. If you have a two-car under, it's about $3,000 per day. Now, if you have an older, cheaper house, maybe an appraiser would say it's $2,000 per day. But if an appraiser says there's no difference between an under and an attached, they're wrong. The market definitely pays more for an attached garage than a basement garage. It's just common sense. I have people arguing with me that I do too much of an adjustment for a fireplace. My answer to that, because I do $4,000 or $5,000 for a fireplace most of the time. It's a cheaper, low-priced old house, maybe less. But I say, look, when you have new construction, how many times does the buyer always want a fireplace and the builder almost always put it in? And he always gets what it costs him or more. And it used to be $4,000 for a brick fireplace, and now it's probably $5,000 or more. Then they started doing the zero clearance in the gas fireplaces, which cost them a little less. But I was finding people were still paying the same price. Cost less, they were paying the same price because they wanted a fireplace. So I even had a lender the other day saying, "You really giving $5,000 to that fireplace?" I said, "Yeah, in this $350,000 house is that. You know, maybe somebody else would do $4,000." But certainly in the days of giving $1,000 or $2,000 for fireplaces, unless it's cheaper older homes, I think are gone. But be aware, that means your comp that has the fireplace and you don't, it's just an adjustment for that. But the new construction or the newer houses where you have, see, we don't have a lot of tract housing in New England. Other parts of the country have a lot of tract houses. It's a lot easier to extract adjustments. So we have to take it when we can get it. And that is when we find a house with or without a feature that are basically the same, then we try and extract what that market is paying. And it may be at around cost, or it may be a little less than cost. It could be a little bit more than cost. You know, some of the big farmers' porches, builders were charging $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 and getting it. And then some builders were saying, "Oh, I'm getting $8,000, but it's really only costing me $6,000 to put it on." You know, well, we're still giving you the $8,000. You know, it might cost a lot of people $24,000. In the cost approach, we do $40 a square foot for that 576 24 by 24 garage. The cost is $24,000. We only give $20,000 in the market. So the builder really, you're losing $4,000 on the garage. But everybody wants it. So, you know, not a big deal. You're not going to get dollar for dollar equal the cost.
So I've got one that's for adding comps to it is the houses, all the houses were built between 95 and 2001 in this subdivision. The contractor came in, he flipped the house, completely rebuilt everything inside of it. It's got grid and everything else for it. The appraiser came in and appraised it with all the other comps in that neighborhood.
And they didn't account for that.
They're like, well, this house sold for 280, this one sold for 260, and these houses haven't been touched since probably 95 to 2000. I mean, they're still wallpaper. I mean, they're old inside. And he comped them with those.
And didn't do the adjustment.
And didn't do any adjustments.
This is the biggest fault with appraisals today. The appraisers are being pressured by underwriters to not do very many adjustments. And if they're going to do them, they want them to really be able to support them, improve them. When the reviewers get hired to review them, they'll criticize them. No support for the quality adjustments. I don't care if there's not support. If you want to go look at the pictures, if you're a good, because there's terrible reviewers out there too. That's the problem.
I had that same thing happen.
So, you know, you'll get a guy that gets intimidated. Maybe he's been doing it a long time, and he says, "Well, you know what? I'm so sick of them criticizing me if I make adjustments, or asking me to add extra comments all the time, or write long addendums. If they don't care, I don't care." And they start taking a lot of the adjustments out. They just stop doing a lot of them. And the newer people in, they go to school, and here they have to support. Don't do adjustments. You can't support. Some of them got it in their head that means you just don't do them because they don't know how to support them. So honest to God, I had one guy hire me because he had a waterfront house, and the appraiser used 3 waterfront houses on all different lakes and different walkouts and finished basements and sloping lots and flat lots. Not one adjustment except GLA. It was for an appraisal management company. I think it was one of the big ones, TD Bank or whatever. So they hire me to go and comps were even good, so I could do comps, do all the adjustments, come up with a much higher value. But this guy's refi, and they bring it to the appraisal management company, figuring that even they can see that an appraisal that has no adjustments between differences in all these waterfront properties has got to be balanced. And the appraisal management company stands by the original appraisal. So I said to the guy, just hold along and go somewhere else and do this, you know? I mean, it was so bad that I anonymously turned that appraisal into the state thing, and I hardly ever do that. But I did it with them. And I wrote on it. I'd like to put my name on the bottom, but then I got to worry about getting blacklisted by, you know, whatever that appraisal management company could drag them into the fact that they are required to pick qualified, competent appraisers. They're liable for stuff too. So you know, it makes it difficult. You know, that's why a lot of people don't even want you guys to know what's going on behind the scenes. So you're supposed to have a lot of adjustments on appraisals in New England. We don't have 4 houses that are all the same in condition and quality, very rarely. So what you can do, what can you do to try and circumvent this to not happen on your appraisal? Well, the first thing you guys can do is I'm going to tell you, a lot of the appraisers now, especially for AMCs, are pre-writing the appraisal. They are filling in that grid, they are getting comps before they even meet you. So you're doing all this work getting comps together and you hand it to them and they're like, thank you very much. They're not even going to look at them. They've already gridded it, it's ready to go out the door practically on a sale. Now, I'll pull some comps because you have to get comp pictures while you're out there. But after I go, I've got them all. I may change my mind after I get there and take different pictures of different ones. But once they got their pictures and they've gone to the house, if they're getting $250 for an appraisal when a regular appraisal is almost $400 now, I mean, you think that person is going to do even their job, never mind extra work? No, they're not. The best thing you can do is don't even, you know, I know everybody thinks the best thing you can do is go meet the appraiser. And you'll go to seminars from lenders that say, make sure you meet the appraiser and you find out what the issues are at the appraisal appointment. I would argue you're all busy. You got to pick and choose your battles. Don't spend the time meeting the appraiser if you don't have to. If it's on lockbox, fine, let them go. Make them promise to call you, though, or call them if they don't. If there's any issue with the condition of the house, that they're going to call for repair. But what you want to do is immediately, if you haven't already, put together comps that you want to email them right away. And the ones you want to do is you can give them comps you want them to look at if you want, but what you want to do is give them the ones they don't want to use. You don't want them to use, and why. So if you know there's a divorce and, you know, over here that's so low, you want to write that. Say, call listing agent to confirm if you want, but this is a divorce situation so low. It's not going to say in MLS that it was a divorce so low. Or how about this one? This house sold for $190 and the appraiser came in low, that didn't know what they were doing, and so they lowered the sale price to $180 because the seller now is under duress to close and didn't want to start over. Is that an arm's length sale? Not to me, it's not. I was doing an appraisal in Leicester. It was a charming older house with character. There were only 4 or 5 comps in the whole town I could use. I think 3 out of the 5 when I called them, that was the situation. I think Darlene Eager had one. The buyer was willing to pay a certain amount of money, kind of close to the asking price. The appraiser comes in $10,000 lower, and because of a duress situation of the seller, they closed at the lower price that the appraisal said. To me, that's not arm's length. I don't know if that appraiser was right. They may have been wrong, probably were. So I didn't use it as a comp. In fact, I didn't use 3 of the comps in that town out of 5. But a reviewer looking at that might say, she bypassed these comps. And if she had used them, it would come out lower. So what did I have to do? Extra work. I had to sit there and explain why I didn't use the comps. I had to go out of town and get a couple.
So do appraisers have to go look at the comps or drive by the comps?
Yeah, we have to go get comp pictures. Do they every
So
single
if we know
time?
something like this one's near the railroad tracks or something like that, it's good to identify those and say, this is probably why this one's a lot lower.
Yeah, and if it wasn't in there to begin with, don't forget, you have one opportunity to add comments when you are reporting it sold. When you're reporting it sold, you can add comments to the listing that you didn't have there to begin with. So one of the things you can do is if you know your sale ended up closing in a non-arm's length situation, you can put a comment right in there. Attention appraisers, this sold in a non-arm's length transaction. Not a good comparable.
That's why I always tell you to make sure.
Because a lot of them don't call you to
Infirm
find out. They're
remarks?
supposed to, but they don't find out the story. So I just had a piece of land I've been holding on to forever in Paxton. 16 acres, 2 perks, great piece of land. Been trying to sell it for a couple years. Lowered it to $89.9, it still wasn't going. I had a family emergency, had to get some money. I ended up dropping that, calling a builder, selling it for $61.5 with a $1,500 commission because it was closed in 2 weeks cash. When I put that in there, I put right in there so that comp didn't kill somebody else's land appraisal. This was duress of the seller transaction, non-arm's length.
Where are you putting that comment? In firm
Right
remarks?
in the remarks.
The
When
firm
I put
remarks?
in my closing price and sale date, I add it to the remarks. At least that way, if you have another deal with that ends up being used as a comp, or your fellow realtor does, now you've at least flagged it somehow for the appraisers who aren't doing their job and calling to find out what the circumstances of the sale were. And if you're wondering why we always are calling you when it's a straightforward listing, this is why. We're supposed to know the circumstances of the sale. If it got close to market asking price, fine. If it got over asking price, we better call and find out. But if it got a lot less, we better call and find out. You better call and find out if it's coming out high. We gridded it, doesn't look like there's anything wrong. But no matter what we do, it's coming out high or low. We call and start asking questions and guarantee there's going to be a story that we wouldn't have known if we didn't call.
Now, it seems recently there's been a lot of transactions that are getting multiple offers all at the same time. There's not enough listings for way too many buyers. Does that say anything to appraisers? Like, we come in and say we list a house at 250,000 and it sells at 260. Are they like, well, why?
That's going to be their reason why they can appraise it over asking. This is a multiple offer situation. A lot of times when that starts happening and marketing times are like under 3 months or under 30 days, that's good indication the market's going up. Appraisers seem to be the last ones to start showing the market go up. They don't want to do it unless they think everyone else is already doing it.
So can you make a line item adjustment for that, or do you have to make it up in?
No. There's a time adjustment line. It's the first line. You have to say whether the market's stable or increasing or declining right throughout the whole report. And if you say it's increasing, you better have a time adjustment. If you say it's stable, you better not be doing a time adjustment, unless it was going up and now it's stabilized. Okay. So the appraiser is supposed to do a time adjustment. A lot of them are leery of doing that because we have lenders that call and say, prove it. We don't have other appraisers doing a time adjustment. How come you are? And I'll be going, how come they're not? Are you kidding me? Right. Shrewsbury, they're not doing a time adjustment? Holden, they're not doing a time adjustment? Are you kidding me? No question. I mean, there are times where I'm on the fence. Condo projects are tough. We've got to really look at. I just had one that I did a condo project in Apraiser. And got this broker's first deal ever. He sells his condo, and I've got to educate him through the whole process. He couldn't thank me enough by the time we're finally done with it. But we had only a few sales of similar condos in the project. He got 190, but it had like 4 back. The other sales were around 185, 186. But when I called, and one of them was 190, 105. And so when I called one of the ones that was 185, she says to me, well, the buyer paid 190, but the appraiser only came in at 185, so the seller had to lower in order to close. So now I got my subject that is selling for 190. I got a comp that's selling for 190, 105. It's a little better. It juts down about 190. And now I have another sale that if it had closed at what the buyers want to pay would be 190. So what it is, and all the marketing times are 3 days, 7 days, 5 days. And so I'm seeing marketing times are real quick. Things are selling, and they're trying to get a little bit more money. But the money back, you only be able to do the net. And with condos, to do money back on the next one is tough. So, but what I'm seeing here is, do I want to say the market's appreciating? Maybe not. But what I do want to do is I ended up placing all my weight on the one comp that made it. And then I explained that the other comp would have made it had it closed to what the buyer originally was paying. Now I got 2 comps that are making it in the same project. One of them is exactly like the subject. So I put that it looked like the market was really kind of slightly increasing for these units. And all it would take is one appraiser to say, okay, I have one on deposit, I got 2, one closed that proves it, one that would have closed that proved it. They're all selling quick. It's, you know, they're desirable units. So I appraised it at 190. Originally, I was going to come in about 188, and they were going to do 2 back instead, adjust the price, and it still would have worked. But in the end, I said, I got one that's making it. I'm going to appraise it out. So now that'll be the comp that will help going forward. So it's tough, though. Condos are not like single families. You've got to be really careful with your closing costs back because it has to appraise at the higher amount. So the other problem was that the list price was 185, and they got 195 back. So, but I found out that we had a direct situation with that seller. They had originally sold it for 170, and then found out, I don't know how this never happened, that when the title came back, they owed a second mortgage that they had forgot about. And they had to come up with another 20 grand, so they had to have the whole deal fall apart and put it back on higher for what it was really worth and hope they could sell it for that, instead of just giving it away, which is what they originally did. But I had to explain that whole thing. And the appraisers now have to show the whole sales history. We have to show when it was originally listed, take it off the market and put it back on, we're gonna see it. We have to find it. Everything that's happened to that house, we have to explain in the last 3 years. And everything that's happened to a comp, we have to explain for the last 12 months. So all the flips, we have to explain. The rule with FHA is we must do 3 years for the comps too. So 3 years for a sale, we have to talk about the previous transfer. So if a bank took it back at foreclosure, we gotta explain that. If then the bank sold it at auction to somebody, we gotta do that. Or an REO. If the guy then renovated and flipped it, we got to talk about that. And if then he changed it from him and his wife to himself, we got to do that. So there's this whole history that we have to check deeds and all this stuff. You wonder why it takes time to appraise. And those are use cap violations. So there's mistakes that an appraiser can make that are mistakes, but our guidelines that we have to write appraisals to is called Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. It's called use cap. If you violate use cap, now you're in big trouble. So it's worse than a regular mistake. And you can, then you're at stake for a licensing complaint where your license could be in jeopardy. So, you know, I tell my appraisers, you miss a transfer for your debt. Because, you know, they have to get the deeds and they have to research them and then they have to explain it. And they say, you can't just report, you must report and analyze. So if your sale's a flip, we have to talk about the last sale and we have to explain everything that's been done to the house since that sale. And therefore, the question is going to arise. Okay, were their permits pulled? They were pulled where they signed off. It's amazing to me how many people are doing flips and they actually did pull permits, but they didn't get them signed off. So I'm actually kind of doing them a favor sometimes because they'll just go get them signed off. If it had just closed and no one cared, I swear they just wouldn't have signed them off.
Do you have to check on finished basement permits?
I don't.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times an underwriter might ask an appraiser to, you know, is the basement finished legal? You know, it's not typical in the market to pull permits.
Do you have to pull it for the electrical and plumbing, or you have to pull it just?
They should, but appraisers aren't really liable to go check that stuff, so we don't.
Right.
Yeah. How much extra, I mean, are you giving money
I
back
mean,
for
if
finished
it was a
basements?
flip and I'm dealing with a flip situation, I am going to make sure plumbing and electrical permits.
Absolutely, and that's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
If you're
I am
finishing
gonna
a
make sure
basement,
plumbing and
that's
electrical
just,
permits.
You know, you're putting some drywall over some studs.
Yeah.
And putting down a new
You know, if you're
floor.
working with investor flippers, you know, tell them it's not worth it. You know, you can lose a deal just because you didn't pull that one more permit or something.
Right.
As far as basements go, how do you guys figure value for finished basement? Are you looking at other comps of finished basements, seeing what they sold more for, or is there?
Yeah, but it can vary. It's supposed to be based on the quality and quantity of the finished basement. So it's not just how much square feet is finished. And now we have to figure out how much square feet is finished. Before we didn't, now we have to know. And that's why it's really good if you guys have the finished basement area. Sometimes the assessors will know it, but if they don't, it's really good if you know how much it is.
What's the role with split level basements? Because
It's a separate line for lower level finished rooms.
it's still considered a basement on split level?
Yeah, and years ago, you guys, nobody would have ever included basements in the GLA. But once people started doing it, everybody felt, well, to compete, I have to do it too, right? I mean, in the old days, you never did that.
It's not
You look like an idiot if you started putting the GLA in the basement up with the regular GLA.
We count all the GLA in the lower level of the basement. Now with the colonial on a slab, we'll find a couple of those that are.
Well, Fannie and Freddie won't allow you to do it that way. You can't even do it that way. There's ANSI building size GLA standards and Fannie and Freddie regulations. You're not allowed to do it that way.
They're so small on the top floor, if you count the bottom floor, it's double the
No,
square
but
footage.
this is
And
what
then
you're
the windows
missing.
are out.
The appraiser can give the basement as much as they want. They can give it as much as the upstairs or more if they want. There's no rule saying the basement has to be worth less. If it's really nice finished area, you can make it worth as much as you want. The appraiser will use their judgment to give that finished basement a value. So it can be 20 grand, 30 grand, 5 grand. I mean, I've seen that where appraisers give this beautiful finished basement with bathroom, bedroom, everything, and they give it 5 grand. And it's probably 20. Maybe they spent 30 and it's worth 20, 25, but it's not worth 5.
No.
You have some really bad appraisers out there. So that's our tool. And if the comps have crappy finished basements with paneling and commercial grade carpeting, dated, and then yours is really nice, you can show the appraiser that and say, make sure you give my basement more than this basement. You almost have to sit there and write notes on it. You know, I have these upgrades. Type up a list of them and give it to them to put in the report. Say, here, I gave this to you right, so you just slide it right in your report. Homeowners do that all the time. I'll say, oh, you did a lot of stuff. Make me a list. Oh, they love it. I come do their refinance and got a nice list. How much spent, what year they put it on. Fine, put it right in the report. You know, more likely to slide in the report than to type it all out. Right? It's not, you know, not going to want to do that. They'll just say, well, just that renovation. So the best thing you can do for yourself is spend your time wisely. Don't worry so much about meeting the appraiser. Worry about getting the appraiser the information before they go, like right away, and show them the ones they shouldn't use and tell them why, especially if you got condos, because they're going to see them and they have to know why they didn't get enough money. And if there's one that's a little over a year that supports your value, the appraiser is allowed to use that, like on a condo or something on the same lake. It has to be a really good reason for them to ever use a sale over a year. But if there is one, hand it to them, because if they say, oh, I can only go 12 months, say, well, I know the normal guideline is 12 months, but I was in a seminar and I heard they can go over a year for a really good reason. And a really good reason would be a condo that hasn't had a sale in a year, but they had one 18 months ago. You bet I'm going to look at that. That's the best comp. I don't care if it's 18 months ago. I don't care if it's 2 years ago. I want to see what's the last one that sold and was that arm's length. If it wasn't arm's length, it doesn't matter. If it's a short sale or an REO or something low, it doesn't really matter because it's not a good comp anyway. It doesn't matter when it was. So you have to help the appraiser out. What's the next best project that they can use for comps? Sometimes it's hard to know that. Look at an MLS. You guys may know them better than the appraiser does. To say, well, there's not enough in this project. I realize that. So these are the two other projects that are the best ones. If there's a private sale on the lake, it doesn't have to have gone through MLS. The appraiser can use it as long as they can get some information on it. I've done that. You know, if you have a big expensive house and somebody sold it private party, appraiser can use it. So, you know, these are things you might want to go find out. If you have an unusual property, you have to go the extra mile because the appraiser may not be the type. They're not going to spend 2 days tracking people down, researching the best comp. We will, but a lot of them won't. Let me see if there's anything else. The in-law was the last one. Now, there's a lot of other FHA guidelines, but these are the main ones. The peeling paint, rotted, anything rotted, and it's peeling paint inside or outside. Any rot. I had one the other day. It had all the aluminum storm windows, but all the wood windows behind the storms were all peeling. So in that case, I called, and the realtors were ready to just let it fall apart. And I called and said, no, no, no. Why can't you do a holdback and have the buyers are going to paint all these rooms afterwards? Why can't they just paint these windows after and do a holdback? So they're doing a holdback and they're putting it back together. They were ready to give up because they just didn't know what to do. And so then I said, well, there is a waiver. With VA, there's a waiver process. Most lenders don't even know there is a waiver process, and they don't know how to go get one. So if the house was really worth a lot more than it was selling for, or maybe it's a really small peeling paint area, and you just can't figure out another way to do it, there is a waiver process, but they don't have to give it, especially in good weather. And I think the house has to be worth a certain amount. That may play into it. I don't know what the reasoning is behind the VA, but the problem is it can take time, and I find that the loan officers, when the person calls the loan officer, they'll go, I don't know how to do that. I didn't even know that existed. That's kind of a problem. So the next best thing, or the best thing, is just to do a holdback. So in this case, luckily they were at a lender that did do holdbacks. And the holdback was for the windows, and then one of the porches and stairs were all peeling paint. So it wasn't just the windows. So then it came down to whatever I said the cost of doing that was going to be, they were going to hold back 1.5 times. So now they were getting 100% financing. So I called the buyer agent, then talked to people who then went to family. How much money can you scrape together? I can go low on the estimate, but I can only go so low. I mean, if I say $600, can someone get together $900? Because it's not going to be a holdback to the seller. It's going to be a holdback to the buyer. Then when you get the work done in the spring, they'll give you the money. And so that's what they did. They pulled it all together. But without me going to try and help the buyer agent, listing agent, and buyer, the whole thing would have fallen apart over some peeling paint. That's really a shame. And really though, it should have been negotiated and dealt with right up front, how we're gonna deal with this. And the buyer agent said, or maybe it was the listing agent said, I didn't think it was gonna be a problem because this guy has a VA loan. So because he has a VA loan, I just figured, well, he got one once. And I'm like, well, obviously that appraiser, whoever it was, on the refi or whatever, didn't do their job, but I can't let it go. I said, I'm not taking a chance that that'll be the 1 out of 10 that the VA guy goes. They can drive by the cops. They better be where you say on that.
So I don't know if this is a new requirement or not, but an agent just brought up to me the other day that the lender, the appraiser noted peeling paint, and the lender, because it was built before 78, was requesting that a lead removal specialist assess whether it was lead paint before they scraped the paint.
Well, that would be, yeah, it can be, you can let it go if it's a newer house and has peeling paint. I believe it's PA or FHA allows you to not peel it if it's a newer house. But most of the time, unfortunately, it's older houses.
So they want you to.
Anything built 1978 or earlier is.
So before, it seemed like sellers would just go scrape and prime and we'd be done and nobody would be talking about it. Now it seems like more what I'm hearing is coming up is they want to require and see that a lead.
Well, the appraiser has to
tested
call
it
for it. If the lender wants to try and show that there's no lead in the VA or the FHA waiver,
I don't think
that's
they cared whether there was lead in the house. They just wanted to make sure that whoever was going to scrape the paint was going to test it, make sure it wasn't lead. If it was lead, then have a lead
fine. They have to
contractor
do it under lead requirements.
do the scraping. So that's something new that I hadn't heard before.
Well, that can be a problem. I mean, even that one, we're gonna go scrape that house, and it's probably lead paint.
Right.
So if it's peeling paint on the side of the house in the 80s, built in the 80s.
That's not gonna be lead.
Right, but it's a non.
But not if it's been painted over.
No, it's more like a sun's been hitting it, so.
Well, no, but I mean, if the house is older than 1978, and there's
Right.
just another coat of paint over the old coat of paint, it can
Right.
still have
So
lead
it's a
paint.
non-issue for an
It's
appraisal.
not as much of an issue for houses built after 1978.
Okay.
But it's still an issue for the appraisal. If it's a year old and it's got flaking and peeling paint, that's.
We're
still a
gonna
problem.
call for it, and then it's up to them what they do.
So if the
from there.
lender, I would suggest your sellers, if they have peeling paint, to deal with it before the appraiser brings it up, because if
Good
they do,
idea.
they might be requiring a pretty
And
costly
negotiate who's
removal.
gonna do it. This is not something that has to be done by a seller. The price can be taken into consideration already, and the buyer would have to do it before closing, although if it's a one-story house, that may not be a big deal. If it's a two-story house, seller and their attorney may not want somebody up on a ladder painting their house.
On a listing appointment, when you walk around, they're gonna say, let me know if there's anything I think I should, what do you think I should do? Go, this one. Yeah, I think that should be taken care of. When they ask when, the answer should be yesterday.
Right.
Well, just say, we don't know. There's a lot of buyers now that are FHA and VA. And even if somebody's approved to go conventional, they may want to do that better program. And the peeling paint could be a stupid thing to do.
Right.
So just negotiate it. But I mean, it's bad enough if you don't tell a seller, but if you're out there with a buyer and you don't clue them into all this stuff before they go spend money on an appraisal and the application that includes and the home inspection and the house and everything they're gonna do. And now they get to the point where the appraisal's done and all this stuff comes up that really they should have been made aware of is an issue right from the beginning. I mean, I really feel it leaves the buyer agents very exposed and listing agents. I mean, I really think that these are basic repairs that you guys should know about. It's one thing if it's something really just, it's new or you didn't know, you couldn't see it, whatever, but peeling paint and railings, everybody should know that that's an issue. And I already have it.
Broken windows, right?
Broken window, I mean, can you imagine paying $100 for an appraisal to come back over a broken window? I've done it. I had one guy say, well, can we board it up to the garage? I said, yes, but you have to remove the broken glass. I go back, board it up on the inside, all the jagged broken glass, still there. I failed it,
I
cost
had
them $200.
an appraiser call out the back of a shed.
Yeah.
Not being painted. It
Yeah.
wasn't painted for 30 years. No one
Doesn't
even thought of it.
FHA.
Yeah.
So the rule on that is, if the shed has no value, you don't have to call for it to be painted. But then if you say it has no value, they'll start questioning you if there's any safety issue or structural issue with that shed, and maybe they'll make it come down. And that could be more of a headache than if you just painted this thing. So If there's major structural problems or roof problems, or sometimes when they can come down. You can't just leave it there and say it has no value. They'll make it come down.
No, it's in great shape.
The appraiser does say.
What's the rule of thumb on roofs? They say it has to have a certain life value left.
The FHA requires a 2-year expectancy.
A 2 year?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, because I gotta.
Gotta get a roofer to come out and say, now listen, with FHAs, with all these new rules, we have a wicked lot of liability, which is why a lot of the appraisers stopped doing it. We already did, and the language they use for FHAs are, the appraiser is personally and criminally liable. So, this goes way beyond your regular, your regular business liability. Dealing with the government, so, being fraudulent is stupid enough, but just, missing things, that you didn't intend to do, is byproduct. I won't even know what I'm doing. So, with the FHA requirements now, we're so liable for the heating system, electrical, plumbing, and everything in that house that we are requesting home inspections. And I tell people, I know that's really, I had mortgage companies call me all nervous. I said, I know that you think that's going to open up more of a can of worms. I'm only going to put it in my file. It's not going to go crazy. The reason I want it is because I feel like without it, to reassure me that some things are fine, I'm going to probably have to call for more inspections to be done. And I could probably eliminate them if you just give me the home inspections. And then if they're an issue, they're an issue. But they're probably going to be an issue for me to call for something, even if I don't get it. They're probably, and so far, every time we've gotten them, if people didn't have one done, then I'm not going to ask them for it if they didn't have homes. But I am liable for the structural stuff that, the beam that stops here and doesn't continue the wall, the sill. There's all these things that we're liable for. And, it may not come up right then, but what happens is, down the road, if that borrower defaults, they go right back to the appraisal and the appraisal. And if there are things found when they send an appraiser that existed obviously at the time, you're screwed. You are really screwed. And they will make the lender eat the loan back. And then the lender and the government will come after the appraiser. So you got to understand that it's really just not worth it. And then the buyer, if there's any kind of a lawsuit for anything, they sue everybody. They'll sue both brokers, they sue the bank, they sue the appraiser, they sue everything. So, you don't always want things to go through, especially legality of multifamilies and in-laws. You really don't want those to go through any way but what they really are. If you need help from an appraiser to try and figure out what it really is, then, that's what you do. If you have to go to the building department, go to the building department. Do not just take the word from the owner that it's an in-law or a two-family. Because they'll say it's an in-law because their mother always lived there. It may legally be a two-family, maybe grandfathered in.
Yeah, we had a 4-family last year. It almost ended up being a big issue because it was four gas meters, 4 electric meters, all the egresses, 4 unit. On assessors is 4 unit, but not a legal 4 unit. It was legally 3, and they added the.
They added the 4. You know what else they'll do? They'll take a 5 and they'll take a unit out.
Make it financeable.
You know why they do that? Because 1 to 4 family is residential finance. Like, down. As soon as you go over 4 units, it's now a commercial loan. Now you need 20, 25, 30% down. So you can actually have 5 and 6 unit properties that are worth less than 4, especially in a bad market. I've had people go in there and reconfigure a building so that they take a unit out and they figure as soon as the buyer closes, it's going to go put it in. So the appraisers, again, liable for that, but they didn't catch it. And then, the assessor's code is a 111 for 4 to 8 units. The code is the same for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The code for a 3-family is 105. The code for a 2-family is 104. And the code for a single family is 101. They are now coming out with a new code for in-laws, but hardly anybody's using it. So
on the in-laws, I think a lot of us seem to run into the ones that they're not really legal. They just finished their basement, they threw a kitchen in there.
that's fine. Then you just say that's an in-law. They do not have to take their kitchen out.
They
Oh
don't.
my God. In
That's
the
what-
old days,
So we don't have to take the stove out.
everybody used to take the stove out, the sink out. You don't have to do that. There was a lawsuit years ago. It was, Bach. Was it Ernie Bach? Yeah. And it went to Superior Court, and he won. And the ruling in court was that a person can have as many kitchens in their house as they want.
Oh, really?
It's unconstitutional to tell someone you cannot have a second kitchen in your house. Just make it a second apartment? No.
Okay.
But is it great for an in-law? Yes. I get mad when I hear of a building inspector who's old school or a lender that starts to make somebody take a stove or a sink out. Because they make great laundry rooms or whatever after, so there's no reason to take the kitchen out. It can stay there. It's just not legally an apartment. So they may say, well, I want, if it's newer especially, they may say, I want proof that permits were pulled up. So they can do that if they think of it. But they can't just arbitrarily tell you, I want the stove up or the kitchen out. They can't do that. And appraisers that are calling for it are even worse.
In reality, if you did it recently, you pulled a permit, they're probably not going to let you put a stove in a refrigerator in there, right?
Oh, a lot of people still
Yeah.
finish their basements and put cabinets, stove, refrigerator, everything.
Yeah.
They do it all the time in basements, especially.
My basement kitchen is better than my upstairs kitchen.
That's a two-family.
No, when I
The
pulled it,
whole thing is you
when I
look at
pulled it from
zoning
there,
and you
it could've
say,
done-
if it isn't
could've done
allowed,
it
how
right
did it
in
get
law.
there? Now, if it's been assessed for over 10 years as a two, they pay taxes on it as a two, there is a mechanism by which the owner can prove that it's been there long enough now that it is grandfathered.
That's what
You
happened
may
with
need
that.
an attorney, but
The
they
one
can
that he
make that be a
described a minute ago.
two-family now. So I had one that had been paying, it had been a two for like 20 years, but they never changed it from a single family. Even the one in Saugus that had the variance in 1985, special permit to make it a two-family, they were being assessed as a single. Even after the guy closed on it as a two, and now he's refinancing. He closed a few years ago. Now he's going to go to the assessors now, because I said it's always going to come up. So just go have them, just do it. And I said, now I'm going to have a copy of that special permit. It's actually a special permit for the use, and it was a variance because the lot size needed to be 10,000 square feet, and only 9,000 something. So they actually got a combined variance and special permit. But I put it right in the report, so now we have one. Sometimes it's just not worth it to be assessed for the wrong thing. But, there's a case right in West Boylston where there's some commercial properties, they're all in a residential zone, and none of them knew it. They all thought they were in a commercial zone. And Sue Miola, who was long-term, probably best realtor out that way, she went to a building inspector and stood there with a buyer who was buying a three-decker that had a commercial unit in it, in a barn. Just want to make sure that this girl's business can go in here, stood there. Oh, yeah, that's in that commercial. Looked it up. Yep, that's in that commercial district. Her businesses. I think they had their business on the second floor. She couldn't put hers on the first floor. Major problem because it turned out it was not in a commercial zone. There were commercial properties on either side, not just mixed use, completely commercial. The whole little area was residentially zoned, and nobody was paying attention. The guy that said that verbally, the buyer and the broker, now is retired, no longer there. Town's not liable. So I said, Sue, I called her up. You want to help this girl. Now she's refinancing. She's moved her business to the first floor instead of the second floor, but she wants to renovate the barn and move her business there and rent out all 3 floors. And if I were you, I'd get involved in this so that you're the one helping, and you don't want to make sure she doesn't end up with some attorney who then decides to sue everyone. Apraiser and whatever. So I was doing a refinance appraisal. And we wanted the highest and best use to actually be residential. Well, because it was, they could just refinance a 3-decker. And I determined that you could get as much rent as an apartment there as you could for what her business was. So we ended up being able to finance that as a 3-family, legally a 3-family in a residential zone, even though she was running her business out of one of them. And now she's going to be working on, what they're going to do is probably go to an annual town meeting and probably rezone that little area because the other businesses on either side are also in a residential zone and legally running businesses. But unless someone makes a complaint, formal complaint to the building inspection knows, they don't do anything. They're not required to do anything. So it only comes up like at a refi or point of sale because those things can sit there for years like that and not like, and nobody does anything. But it's really important that you not get caught like that. This one's going to turn out okay, but you know, I think if I wasn't the appraiser and kind of got a positive spin on it, got that girl some help, and made sure she didn't end up in some attorney's office, that it could have been really bad for that realtor, the veteran realtor, you know, what she's doing, and went to the town and stood in front of the guy, and still was going to get caught. So, you know, these people come and go. I had one guy that I had to go to court on a case, and the building inspector in Worcester had told me something was, I forgot what it was. And then we were on the stand, and it's 5 years later, whatever, and the people on the other side bring that same building inspector and testify, he lied at that time, because he told me that time. The judge ended up believing me because I had no motivation. And that guy no longer worked for the city. And the judge said, you know, I'm going to go with her testimony because she has no motivation whatsoever to make that up. She has the guy's name, what he said, you know, long-term appraiser, what motivation would I have? So, you know, verbal stuff doesn't work too well. You can come back behind afterwards. So anyway, I mean, know about financing. Find lenders that are, you know, doing a good job with certain products so that you can kind of help your buyers get there. Or if they get approval letters from those places, you know, then you kind of know that the seller can feel more at ease about how it's all going to work. I mean, you're really doing your seller and buyer a service by being a little more educated about financing and costs. Trying to make sure your appraisal is going to come out okay. I mean, in the old days, people would say, oh, this is how it's worth it all day long. You know, now it doesn't matter that it's worth it all day long. You still have to always worry about the appraisal because you have to worry about who it is. You're not just doing that way. Usually, even if it was close to being worth that, because the appraisal was picked by the lender to go, it probably was going to appraise. Now, you have to worry no matter what. The more unique the house is, the worse it is. You have a one-bedroom house, you got a problem. You have a small house, you got a problem. You got houses on lakes, you got a problem.
Big pieces of land.
Big pieces of land, you got a definite problem. Really careful about big pieces of land. You don't know what you're doing with the land. Get some advice before you go listing or buying.
So on those really unique properties, does it make sense to hire someone like you, for the seller to hire someone like you to do an appraisal before
I can
list
tell you
it?
the second thing we used to get lots about all the time before, we don't see it as often, is brokers would help a seller sell a property that has land, and maybe it wasn't even a lot of land, but there was enough frontage for the lot. And they didn't get the money for the other one. The buyer bought it, and the buyer got the other one. And it'll happen with states, all kinds of stuff, because the brokers didn't know how to walk. They just knew there had a house on it.
So then what, the previous seller sued because they didn't get,
Yes.
they didn't make enough money?
That broker didn't tell them.
Okay.
You're the qualified real estate professional.
Right.
You didn't tell them they could get a whole other lot value.
We're supposed to help them get the
property.
highest and best
Yes,
price
the
out of
highest
it.
best use. Yeah, you're wicked liable if you miss that.
Right.
Now there's not as many out there. A lot of people got away with that though. They would go around looking for the unsuspecting seller and the unsuspecting listing agent that had properties on the market that you could spin off a lot. And they would make all kinds of money. Now sometimes like an estate doesn't care, but they at least have to be informed. You're giving up this value, and if you don't divide it off and sell it separately, you're giving up some value just for the fact it's going together because it takes some money and it's not worth as much when it gets divided, and it may need a perk. And I've had more people say, oh, well, they don't want to go through all that. I'm like, really? They're going to give up $80,000? The fellow will go, it's that much money? Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't think about, let me think about that.
Right.
But what about, it's only got 400 feet of frontage and 12 acres in back, and you require 250. Okay, well, it doesn't have enough for another one. I think you're in the clear, right? I had a piece in Princeton like this. And the lender said to me, well, just give it $1,000 an acre for that excess land because it's not enough for an extra lot. And I'm like, okay, this appraiser that was going to do it. But he wasn't a certified general. So you have to have a commercial license to appraise anything where the highest best use can be, whether one lot or to develop it. So residential appraisers are not qualified to even do those appraisals. And do you know how few commercially licensed appraisers even do residential properties anymore? Very few. So there's very few people that are even qualified to do either a house that's on some excess land, whether or not there's enough frontage, or a house that sits on an industrial or commercially zoned lot, but it's a residential house. Only a commercial appraiser who also does residential can do that appraisal. So I'm constantly telling lenders, you know, you're lucky you hired me and now I want extra money. Especially some of the ones I've been getting lately that are bank owned. What happened with this Princeton property was, the house situated here, there was enough room to put a road in and get a cul-de-sac for 5 lots, and that excess land was worth over $1 million. I think those old people that were selling it or refinancing it, if they had gone and sold it for the $450,000 instead of the $1.450, would have maybe had some reason to come after the appraiser and the broker and the banker, everybody. And when I said that to the banker, I said, there's room to have a road come in and have the house front on a new road. There's views back there of Mount Wachusett. If you cut some trees down, I mean, this land is really valuable. This is an older couple. That's their retirement, and they don't even know it. I am not going to do that unless what the lenders do now is, and they have for years, is they'll have us do a hypothetical condition so that we can keep the appraisal fee low, and they can borrow just on the house and a single lot with a yard. Because Fannie and Freddie won't lend on that excess land value anyway. So the appraiser is allowed to do a hypothetical condition that says, this is what it's worth, as if the land is not further developable, even though it is. And that way, we can do it for a regular appraisal fee, and we just give it, but we put that in bold everywhere. And that the real market value without the hypothetical condition is much higher than what the value is that we've done. So if you're selling something that has excess land and the buyer's paying more because they know they're going to get the lot, or they're paying more because they got the separate piece across the street, they're on the lake and they got the separate piece across the street with a garage on it or a separate piece, that's a problem because the bank can't maybe lend on the other piece. They can only lend on this. So if it's worth it without that piece, fine. But if you need that piece for the value, you can run into a problem with financing. So once again, you need them to go to like a lender that can do an in-house loan because you're going to have problems with secondary market financing. So the whole thing might fall apart, even though the value's there, because no one looked at the financing issues that are going to come up over the excess land or over the extra piece of land that's coming with it. You know, I had one the other day that was on the other side of Route 2, but it was on the same deed, and the lender for the VA is saying, I don't understand why can't you include that, it's on the same deed. I said, it's divided by Route 2, it's a separate legal piece. The VA does not allow us to do it, nor are we allowed to do it, even if they did, it has its own value. Yeah.
Maria, do you remember the house we did transaction?
Yeah.
Across from that, I have one on Gordon Street.
Okay.
They've got a house in a,
Okay.
that's been recorded in the register. So if we're selling it with that.
No, it does have value. The problem will be when the guy goes to try and get a loan, the appraiser can't just put them together. It's got to be two separate things. So you want the appraiser to hope, if the guy is paying extra for that lot and is expecting to have it appraised out, because they don't understand about financing either, the best thing they can do is go to a local lender that might be able to do it in-house, because that's a separate appraisal for that lot. And so only certain lenders will lend on land. The appraiser can just do a lot appraisal.
So they're gonna do the house.
They're blanket mortgaging 2 properties. Now be careful, because you can have a house and a lot next to it, and they're legally separate. Separate assessments, separate deeds. But if they've been owned by the same ownership for over 10 years, and this lot with a 3-family on it isn't big enough to be selling right now, they may have lost their grandfather rights to that. Well, how did they approve it? What do you mean? Like, did they recently divide it?
Yeah.
Oh, they recently divided it. Yeah, so once even if it wasn't divided, but now that it is divided and there's a plan on record, even if it hasn't been done yet, it's 2 legal pieces of property. The bank has to blanket mortgage those. So make sure the buyer's going to like a local lender, savings bank, credit union, somebody who lends on land, because if they need the value of the other piece in order to get their loan, that's what they want to do. I mean, if they're only paying $5,000 extra for it, fine, but if they are paying a certain amount, it won't appraise out without it. Yeah, and a lot of times it will be discounted. Yeah, so both lots are conforming, and that's the other thing that happens. Attorneys are supposed to advise people that if you have this lot next to your house, that you keep it in a separate ownership. They call it checkerboard ownerships. If you had a whole bunch of them, you'd want to have every other one in a different name. That protects the grandfathered status of those lots. So say all of them meet zoning now. People hang on to them for 20 years, figuring out, it's going to retire them and get all these lots. Somewhere along the line, they change zoning from 1 acre to 2 acres. They have it all in one name, they lost it. They lost the grandfather rights. Doesn't matter if they're doesn't matter.
So that's one I'm doing right now is, so the house itself, the guy bought a land next to it that was abutting. The house is one property. It was 2 separate deeds. They're taxed 2 separate things. The other set of property has a garage that's like built into the land. Is that, it doesn't meet the zoning laws nowadays. That lot isn't big enough to be its own lot.
If it's already improved
But
with
it's
a garage,
been
I don't
there
know that
since
it
the
can be
70s.
grandfathered because it's improved. They need
So-
an attorney for that one.
So would that still be able to sell as 2 separate properties?
Well, they're legally separate now. The whole question is whether or not that one with the garage is grandfathered to do anything with it. Now, if the answer is no, and the only use for it is for the garage and that lot to go with this house, they may want to, and they can do it at closing, they may want to record a plan at closing that makes it one parcel now.
Okay.
Because then they're going to save on taxes, number one. And if that's the only use, now they are going to lend on one piece because it's going to become one piece. And especially if you can't use it separately anymore. You can record a plan at closing that combines it all. You have a surveyor you have an engineer do a little plot survey plan and removes the lot line and makes it one plan, and they record that at closing. And then the assessors get that, and they only assess it as one now, and it'll save some tax. I have a property in Holden, it's a single family, and right in the middle of the yard, it's a little teeny square of land, landlocked in the middle of the yard, that is legally separate, on a separate deed, a separate assessed piece. I cannot sell it separately. But until I go pay to have a plan recorded that legally merges it as one, the assessors will not assess it together, and I'm paying extra taxes every year for that piece. So I had to weigh out, how many years am I going to probably keep it? Am I paying, what, $50 a year? How long will it take for me to recoup the $700 or $500 or whatever it's going to cost me to do the plan and get it recorded? I had to weigh whether it was even worth it. So, but that is a really confusing issue for lenders, definitely for appraisers. Again, they aren't taught a lot of this stuff in school, and probably for you guys. Don't go over that stuff, but you got to really be careful. Always read the deed. The other thing that comes up that kills deals and is stupid is some easement or some restriction that was in the deed that even if it's not a big deal, but because the buyer wasn't told about it, they're now pissed because the appraiser's got it on the appraisal and it's being brought to light at that stage. And they start to have this distrust that it wasn't presented to them, even if it was not a big deal what it was. And if you don't know what a right-of-way is for or whatever, please try and find out. We have to try and find out. We go ask you. It might be, I had one the other day. It was right-of-way over the lawn to get to an abutter's garage in the back that was no longer there. So it was from years ago. So it didn't adversely affect it, and it wasn't even really being used for the purpose it was originally there for. It looked like grass. I would never have known it unless I looked at the deed, and then I had to ask, and then I had to try and find out.
But it can affect the buyer big time if the buyer wanted to put a pool there. They can't.
Well, the point, yeah, it's an easement, so you can't just get rid of an easement. And the other, it's just disclose up front and read it. And if you don't know, get some help from somebody who does know. Appraisers are told the same thing. You're allowed to do some appraising on things that you're not necessarily familiar or an expert at, but you are required to go and link up with someone who is and get advice and experience and have that person help you with that assignment so that the next one now you can say, okay, I've done one of these, now I'm confident. That's how appraisers start doing commercial. The first ones they do are probably under someone else who's giving them, mentoring and reviewing it. And then they can say, okay, now I have experience doing this type of property. But you have to learn somehow. So it's not stay away from it. It's go ahead and take it on, but go find someone who is an expert with that and get some education on what to do, because you're really in trouble if you get caught on this thing. One last thing you'll probably think me about, we're talking about public versus private streets. Call the city clerk. It's always the town clerk that is the legal keeper of records for streets. You must call, don't call the assessor, don't call the DPW, you call the clerk. And don't ask the assessor any zoning questions. If they tell you the wrong thing, they're not liable. They're not the person that has the authority to answer the question. But no, a lot of them do. They can only tell you about assessing. That's it. You need to know something about zoning, you go to the zoning enforcement office. You need to know something about building code, you go to the building inspector. You need to know about whether a street's public or private, or if it is a street, you go to the town clerk. They are the official keeper of records. They also are the official keeper of special permits. They will tell you if a special permit's been issued, but it has to be recorded at the registry within 2 years, or it's void. So you've got to start getting comfortable with the registry and how to go searching for things online at the registry. Thank God it is online. In the old days, it wasn't even online. I came that one. I used to make people bring their deeds. But if the street is gravel in a city, it may be public or private. You don't know. But even some of the other ones that are paved are private streets. And you have to know if it's private. Now, if it is private, you have to find out from the city or the town whether or not it's publicly maintained or snow removal. That's the requirement from the secondary market. If it is not plowed, then there has to be a written private maintenance agreement, or the people cannot get secondary market financing. Do you think that might affect the value? It could. It could, because they keep a fixed rate. They may have to do in-house loans to the bank and get a variable rate. That can affect the value of the property. But certainly you don't want to be not disclosing that to somebody until the appraiser does. Or worse, it closes because the appraisers weren't checking or made an assumption that it was a public street, because it kind of looked like one. But even worse, I had one the other day. We were at a seminar. I think Fairway was giving a seminar, and we had a realtor that the deal fell apart because it was on a private street, and I believe it was publicly maintained for snow removal, but not other maintenance. And that particular mortgage company that was doing the loan said, we can't do the loan. So the realtor thought that meant no one could do the loan. And he then went to the seller and had him give away that property for like $100,000. And he then was liable because the loan could be done by a lot of mortgage companies. So Fairway told the story because Fairway could have done that loan and not had a problem. So you have to know. Unfortunately, you can't take everybody at face value what they tell you. They tell you the wrong thing. So he gave away this house for like $100,000, and the seller lost $60,000. Now he didn't get sued, but I think he's going to lose sleep over it because he knows it happened. The seller knows. So yeah, should he lose sleep? Yeah, I'd be worried.
So that private agreement would be like an agreement between everybody on the street saying they're paying a certain amount.
Yeah, I have one in Paxton. Now this is what's bad. In Worcester, by the way, if there's a house on it.
I feel so bad.
Oh, that's all right.
For half a second. Does anybody have a gray Hyundai SUV?
I have a black one.
Black one?
Fine.
Yeah, I gotta get out. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
that's
This is
okay.
incredible, by the way. Thank
That's
you very
okay. So yeah, it's my last thing about the private street. So I have one on a dirt road in Paxton that goes to a cottage and sits on the reservoir, and it used to be plowed by the town when a selectman had property there. And then over time, the selectman's office decided not to plow that road, but they plow all the other roads in town. They stopped plowing that road. When I bought the property, there was a fireman renting the little cottage, and he plowed for the town. And the funny thing is, we'd all on the street watch the plow go all the way down to the end and pick up the fireman and drive him all the way out, but he wouldn't put that plow down and plow it. Because the selectmen voted not to plow that road. And one selectman kept saying, it's not a street, even though it had its own name. It's a right-of-way. It's not legally a street, and we're not plowing it. The guy who did the plowing on the road had built a house about 60 he had spent 6 years in court against the town to force them to give him a building permit because his frontage was on that road. There was a court case in writing where the judge ruled that it was a street and they were to give him a building permit. Town fought him for 6 years, so he built his house there. And this old guy on the selectmen, he's still saying, well, we just finally had to give in because we're spending so much money, but it's still not a street. Even though I have it in writing in the court case that it's a street. And our thing is they're being arbitrary. They're plowing all the other private streets, but not ours. And towns can do that. I mean, I remember once Rutland has cool sandy beach area. I don't know if you guys are familiar with pond. It has all these blue cottages and all these little dirt roads. Little teeny lots. They have a hard time with septic and wells and tight tanks. The roads are all dirt roads, and the town plows those. And they're low enough values as it is, and nobody lives there has any money. One year, the town, to save money, was going to stop plowing all the cool sandy beach neighborhoods. I mean, people would have been, their property values were already low enough, they would have been non-existent. I mean, I had to call and like beg them. Save money another way, you don't know what you're doing. They don't know this in the town, that if they vote to not plow, that they have now ruined the opportunity for people to sell their property to secondary market price. And then even an in-house loan, if the appraiser has to say this has an adverse effect on value. I had one lender call me and say, will this have an adverse effect on value? And I said, well, it depends. You tell me. If you're not going to lend on it, then guess what? It now has a negative effect on value. Catch 22. If you tell me you'll lend on it anyway, then it doesn't. So they don't understand that. And the appraiser, like I said, you got to just be careful about the streets. It's easy in Worcester if it's a dirt road, you know that it might be. But a lot of them are paved and you just don't.
I bought a house on a dirt road. It was listed as a public street all through the closing. Public. They just let the I didn't go after it because it is a private street. The sign went up about a year after I bought it.
The realtors never seem to call. The appraisers, a lot of them aren't taking the time to call. They're supposed to.
I knew I wanted to be a realtor, so I was like, well, I'm not going to sue anyone in that business.
Well, that happened to me. I helped my brother buy a house out in Rutland, and Rick Welsh was the listing agent. And we found out afterwards that subject tax Title V, but the homeowner on a weekend with some guy put it in, drinking it. They paid somebody to make the Title V come out. And the thing failed. I wasn't going to. The attorney's like, we've got to sue the realtor. We're not suing the realtor. I looked at my brother and said, you're not suing the realtor. Refused to sell the realtor. And the homeowner had moved out of state. So if they move out of state, they can't go out. The homeowner's moving out of state, you're not going to go. That's why all the mortgages go out. We weren't suing the realtor. We didn't know. But it failed. Totally cost my brother $20. But, he had me for a sister. There's no way I would do that.
Yeah.
I helped my brother make a lot of money in real estate. So, and
suck
he
it up.
did have family in the business that did help him not do it. That was a shame. But would it have been fair to go after that realtor? Okay. That's what they do. I know when appraiser had to put a septic in because they checked off sewer or something like that.
I got one quick question, going back to roofs. I'm on my way to inspection, fires FHA.
Mm-hmm.
Roof's 25 years old, has a couple missing shingles. How much of a problem is that going to be?
I would get a roofer now to go
Yeah.
look at it and write you up something saying it has certain years left, 3-5 years.
Probably good, yeah.
Even if he has to do a few little shingle repairs while he's writing that estimate, and give it a little bit of money, because now you know it's going to make it through everything.
What-
VA,
They
FHA.
just only require 3 to 5 years lifespan?
Well, FHA requires a couple years. VA, the appraiser just has to state that it's, not gone. So the appraiser responds. But FHA is more liable now. That's the one I would look at as an FHA appraiser, and I'd say, I'm sorry, you need a roof inspection. I'm not taking that
What
one.
do you do when you can't see it because snow's covering it? Does that,
Well, that's it. So, right, you don't, that's the
so then
problem.
you just pass it?
I always ask the age of a roof on every single inspection, and I always put it in the report. So if a realtor tells me, oh, it's 15 years, that's what I'm writing. So if you're wrong, I put who told me and what the thing is. So, anyway, it isn't only
Right.
coming back on me.
Right.
I wouldn't take those questions lightly. Yeah, especially if there is snow. But it'll put that, it'll show that in our pictures. And if it was also a scuttle, that means we can't get all the way up there. But don't forget, if it's a pull down, we have to go up and inspect underneath. So you might as well just do that if there is. If there's a walk upstairs or a pull down, we have to go up and look. My own house in Paxton was on the market for 2 years. I had an ice dam backup thing like the year before, and the insurance company came out and I got paid. Water had streamed down my walls in my living room. We got it all paid for. It never occurred to me to go up to my attic. Right before closing, the home inspector goes up there, and I got mold up there. I had to remediate mold right before closing from an ice dam because I just didn't think of going up there.
Now, is it the lender or the appraiser that sometimes pull insurance histories on properties? Because I had one last year.
Appraiser does.
The appraiser does it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I've had a lender come back and say, this homeowner got the money for this, this, and this. We want to see that they actually did that work. It was for
Wow.
ice dams. We got like $20,000 for ice dams, and the seller didn't
Wow.
do the repairs.
Somebody was
For an
smart.
ice dam.
That would have to be the lender.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, we're all probably doing everybody a favor to ask for some inspections. I know it's a pain in the ass at the time, but a lot of times it's just safer all the way around. And usually it's fixable somehow. Some of these things are not big money items. Even that roof, it might be expensive. If the buyer doesn't have the money to do it, the price has already been adjusted, then maybe they can get the construction loan now, or they can get the FHA 203K now to do that roof they would have had to do in a couple years, and they're going to thank you because now it's all taken care of now.
What's price with the roof being replaced in a
Right.
couple
So
years
it's up
from
to
now?
the buyer to try and figure out a way to finance that in. You
Okay.
just want to tell them up front. You know, if it's got a few years left, it's going to pass. You know, so, but if there's a few shingles missing, you know, that's going to ship off an appraiser to call for an inspection. So I would replace the few shingles and I would get a report to give the appraiser because we're more than happy to say it's fine if we have something in writing that somebody else that's a roofer said it's fine. I had one that I was questioning a bunch of stuff and I got a list. The lender gave me the list from a contractor who said this is fine, this is fine, this is fine. And I'm looking at it, I said, oh, great. And then I looked and I went, you see that the contractor's last name is the same as the seller. No, she goes, oh, we're buying, whatever it was. She goes, oh, I didn't notice that. I said, doesn't matter to me. The liability's on him now. I don't care. I'm just pointing it out to you. And we were both laughing. I mean, we knew either one of us was going to let it go. But licensed contractor, fine with me. I just don't want the liability on me. That's all it is. And if I don't have it on me, then it's not going to be on you hopefully either.
We all should be thinking the same thing as realists.
Well, like in education and, you know, just being aware of certain things and learning of certain things. I mean, like that new kid that just his first deal on a condo, he had no idea that, you know, why you had to get a budget or what was in it that was important or, you know, he just didn't know anything because we do have to state whether or not the reserves are adequate and the condo fees are adequate and stuff in the report, so we have to get it. And if we don't get it, we have to say requests are not provided to us. But we always get it because the lender's just don't hold it. But I had one that there were solar panels on the roof of the building, and I didn't even see them, but there was income coming in from the solar panels. Then there were income coming in from these storage garages or something, but they were actually renting out to the homeowners. And there's a question on the appraisal, are any of the things leased to or from the homeowners association? About the budget, I wouldn't even know. So I told the realtor, and he's like, wow, I didn't even know that. From now on, when I list one of those in that building, I'm going to have to remember that we have to get that budget and close that. I said, it's offsetting the condo fees so much. That's why your condo fee is so low. So I was wondering why it's so low. I said, they're getting all this money. That's other income. If it ever stops, you know, you're in trouble. The condo fee is going to go up a lot. But, you know, we have to know if there's going to be a special assessment for parking lot or roof or something. We have to know that there's money in reserve. So we have to know all that stuff. So you really should know, too. It isn't just finding out what the percentage of own market is. It's also getting the budget, you know, getting there's a financial statement that tells you what's in reserve. Great. There's no reserve. And the buyer's attorney might think of it, even if the buyer and buyer agent don't. You've got a building that looks old and things starting to go, they may think, oh, well, condo fees will pay for it. Well, if you look at the thing, there's no reserves at all. It could be a huge special assessment, like, they're gonna get hit with a shock. That would be kind of a thing that would affect value, and you can be liable for not disclosing.
Do solar panels add value to a house?
If they're leased, we aren't allowed to give them value.
So you don't give them anything?
We can't. We're not allowed to give them value if they're leased because they aren't real estate. If they're owned, it gets complicated. There's less situations where they're owned.
Yeah.
And there's very few appraisers that know how to do it. And then the appraisal fees can get kind of a lot for doing it. So sometimes we, again, hypothetical and leave it out. But if somebody's paying a lot of money for it, that can be a problem.
So even if someone has solar panels and it's drastically cutting their utility costs in it, to an agent that might be, or a buyer, it may be a little bit more valuable, but it's, the house still has to appraise, regardless of those
Right.
panels being on it.
Well, they can take into consideration the energy efficiency though.
Okay, okay.
They can give an adjust for energy efficiency. What we're headed for now is that energy efficiency is going to be such a big thing that Fannie and Freddie down the road, they're working on this now. They're trying to educate the realtors first. Realtors are the missing link and the biggest problem. The reason for that, because I went to the first class that there's ever been given about appraising for green energy. And a realtor got up and said, we are the problem. There is a way in MLS to check off energy efficiency, and then there are different kinds of energy efficient items that the realtors are supposed to check. Energy Star, whatever, not just appliances. And they're not doing that. They're putting some comments in the comments, but they're not checking off the fields. And so when an appraiser goes to try and pull up data to get a percentage adjustment of what energy efficient houses are selling for as opposed to not, they're trying to pull that match pair thing that I told you about to get an adjustment because you guys aren't using the fields for energy efficiency that are built into MLS. We don't have the data to get what we need to do the adjustment. Now, the reason Fannie and Freddie want to see that start happening, and there's a lot of dialogue starting about that, and appraisers starting to try and learn, especially the better ones, that then teach it, is because Fannie and Freddie down the road want to see every house have a HERS rating. And then they are going to be able to qualify buyers for more money if the HERS rating is better for energy efficiency than a buyer that's buying a house that's not as energy efficient. Their logic is we're going to tie in those utility expenses to allow a buyer buying an energy efficient home to buy more house. So that's where we're all headed. It's going to take a while to get there.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be more and more.
$300 a month
But
lower.
builders bitch and buyers bitch because they need to get the money to put the stuff in, and the buyers want to pay it. And then the appraiser comes and it doesn't appraise out, and everybody's frustrated. But the reason is the appraiser needs data. Now, I'll just do the adjustment. Even if we can't prove it, I'll find a reasonable amount to do. But you can understand why they're being grilled. Make sure your adjustments are supportable. Make sure you have market evidence to do the adjustment. So you guys gotta, don't just put it in the comments, use the fields that are in MLS and check them. And educate yourself on the difference.
Yeah.
So I have cards if you guys want, because I'm sure you'll have questions.